My name is Lauren Parker, and at 36 years old, I remember the weight of the air that day. Thick, heavy, and perfumed with lilies that seemed to cling to every breath. My mother's casket gleamed in its polished oak, flowers piled high, candles flickering like quiet witnesses. 6 months of watching her fade away from cancer had left me hollowed, a shell clinging to memory, rituals, and grief. I had spent the last week rehearsing how to appear calm, how to nod, how to smile faintly when acquaintances whispered condolences. I never expected my heart to fracture again at a moment meant only for mourning. I was seated in the front row, hands folded in my lap, staring down at the casket. Edward, my fiancé of nearly 3 years, sat beside me. His hand brushed mine occasionally, the way he always did to reassure himself that he was playing the part of the grieving partner perfectly. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to let the touch soothe me. But something flickered in the corner of my vision. Edward's phone buzzed. He kept it tucked under his black suit jacket, but the faint glow caught my eye. I tried to ignore it. I was supposed to ignore everything and just be present for my mother. But curiosity, or maybe intuition, has a way of cutting through numbness like a scalpel. He glanced down, thumbs moving quickly across the screen. That was normal enough, but the tension in his shoulders, the slight stiffening of his fingers, the micro-expression that flickered across his face, it told me he thought he was being discreet. He wasn't. And then I saw it. Just one message. Brief, glowing in bright letters. She's at his mother's funeral. The house will be ours. My stomach dropped. My mother's funeral. My home. My grief. And in one line, everything I believed about the man I loved, about our life, came crashing down. The world slowed. The mourner's whispers, the soft shuffling of feet, the muted organ music, all faded to a dull hum behind the thunder in my chest. I didn't even need to read the sender's name to know the truth. Edward was cheating. And the audacity of it, planning to claim my house while I was burying the woman who raised me, was beyond comprehension. I watched him send the message, then lock the phone with a practiced flick, his hand resting gently on my thigh. A comforting gesture, a lie wrapped in skin and warmth. I sat frozen for what felt like eternity. The ache of losing my mother was still there, raw and gnawing, but now it was mingled with cold fury. I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice calm, even hollow. I forgot something at home. I'll be right back. His eyes widened, genuine concern, or as close as a practiced mask could mimic it, crossing his features. Oh, honey, of course, he said softly. Do you want me to come with you? No, I murmured, voice steady. I need a minute alone. He nodded, too trusting, too arrogant in his assumption that I was still fragile, still dependent, still blind. I walked out of the funeral home. The sun was muted, gray clouds hanging low, as if the sky itself mourned with me. I didn't drive home. I didn't need to. My mind was already spinning, calculating, methodical. I went to the nearest hardware and security store, my grief curdling into precise, cold determination. I bought everything I could imagine to reclaim control. Smart locks, cameras, a garage hub, motion sensors, sirens that could wake the dead, and enough no trespassing signs to make a small army reconsider approaching my property. Each beep of the scanner at the checkout felt like a heartbeat, a quiet rhythm to match the pulse of rage inside me. By the time I reached home, the house was silent. The faint smell of turpentine and unfinished paint lingered from my mother's last project, her painting still perched on the easel, waiting to be finished. I gently draped a sheet over it, as if shielding her memory from the chaos that was about to erupt. I got to work. 2 hours later, every lock, every sensor, every possible point of entry had been fortified. Edward's old access codes were useless. His keys, meaningless. The house, my sanctuary, was mine again. I stood back and surveyed my work. The red and white no trespassing signs glared like silent sentinels. Cameras angled precisely, sirens hidden but lethal. The house had become a fortress. And in that moment, grief and rage intertwined, forging something sharp and unyielding. I didn't feel victorious. I felt ready. When I returned to the funeral home, Edward was still seated, pale and unsuspecting. I slipped back into the service, my expression composed, almost serene. His hand brushed mine again, and I let it. For appearances, for the moment. I was quiet. I was calculating. I was standing on the precipice of a revelation that would shatter everything he thought he knew about me and everything I thought I knew about love. I left the funeral in a daze, though every step felt deliberate. The gravel crunched beneath my heels, but I barely noticed the sound over the storm raging in my chest. Grief had dulled my senses, yes, but betrayal sharpened them. Edward, my fiancé, the man I had trusted with my heart, had dared to plot behind my back while I was burying my mother. And with him, a stranger, a woman named Natalie, whose audacity was as brazen as it was calculated. I drove without purpose at first, letting my mind process the message over and over. The house will be ours. My home. My mother's house. Everything she had worked for, everything she had entrusted me with, all poised to be stolen by people I had once welcomed into my life. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of a high-end hardware and security store, the initial shock had hardened into a sharp, cold focus. I walked through the automatic doors, my presence quiet but purposeful. 2 hours passed inside that store. My cart was heavy with technology that could have belonged to a security contractor. A state-of-the-art smart lock, keypad and camera included. A new hub for the garage door, cutting off all previous remotes. Motion detectors, door and window sensors, and external sirens that could pierce the night. Bright red, no trespassing signs, heavy-duty zip ties, and every tool I would need to assert control. Each item I placed in my cart felt like a small victory, a reclamation of power. My fingers tingled with anticipation, every beep of the scanner a rhythmic drumbeat of what was coming. Driving home, I rehearsed the sequence in my mind. Every angle, every sensor, every code, planned with the precision of someone who had learned over years that grief could be weaponized into strategy. The house was quiet when I arrived. The air was still, almost reverent, as if it, too, understood the sanctity of what I was protecting. My mother's unfinished painting still rested on its easel, stubbornly alive in a world that now felt cold and treacherous. I covered it carefully, a small gesture to preserve the one thing that remained unbroken. I set to work. 2 hours of meticulous labor passed as I replaced every lock, installed the smart system, and configured the sensors. The garage hub was synced to my phone. The doors could no longer be opened without my authorization. Motion detectors watched every corner, every hallway, every potential point of intrusion. Sirens, hidden but deadly, would announce anyone who dared challenge me. Finally, the no trespassing signs went up, red and white warnings tied to the front gate, the porch railing, the side fence. My house had become a fortress, not against the world, but against the betrayal I had been forced to confront. By the time I returned to the funeral home, calm had descended over me like a cloak. Grief was still there, raw and gnawing, but it was now tempered by a cold, clinical determination. Edward had no idea what I had done. He believed his manipulations were secret, his plans secure, how wrong he was. He looked up when I slipped back into the service, a faint smile touching his lips. His hand brushed mine again, a gesture of comfort, or perhaps of arrogance. I let him touch me, outwardly composed. Inside, I was a storm, coiled and ready to strike. When the funeral ended and the procession moved to the cemetery, I followed silently, my gaze fixed on the casket. Edward kept up beside me, whispering reassurances that now felt hollow. The moment was a blur, the lowering of my mother, the murmured prayers, but I barely registered it. My mind was already on the next steps. Back at home later that evening, I surveyed the house one final time. Every sensor was armed, every camera live, every lock in place. The house hummed quietly with technology, a silent sentinel ready to protect what was mine. I stood in the doorway, hands on hips, staring at the neat lines of sensors and sirens. And then I smiled, not with joy, not with relief, but with the satisfaction of someone who had reclaimed control in a world that had tried to rip it away. The phone buzzed. Edward. I didn't answer. I let it ring. Let him fume. Let him feel the first taste of panic he had so casually tried to unleash on me. By midnight, the house was quiet again, save for the soft hum of the security system. I sank into the couch, finally letting exhaustion wash over me. My mother's absence was a weight, yes, but so was the knowledge of betrayal. And now, armed with foresight and resolve, I was ready to confront it on my terms. Tomorrow, the confrontation would begin. But tonight, I rested in the quiet victory of preparation, knowing that the storm was coming, and that this time I would not be the one caught in the rain. The drive back to my house felt surreal. The streetlights stretched long across the wet asphalt, and the night smelled faintly of rain. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, heart steady with purpose. Every inch of me was calm on the surface, but beneath that, a quiet storm raged. Edward didn't know what awaited him, and that ignorance was my leverage. When I pulled up, the first thing he noticed, though he wouldn't admit it, were the red and white no trespassing signs I had installed earlier that evening. His eyes narrowed. Something felt off. He stepped out of the car, keys jingling, confidence masking the tiny twitch of uncertainty in his jaw. "Lauren," he called, voice casual, as if we were arriving at a dinner party. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said, voice flat, even, almost eerily calm. "Just thought I'd get here first." He frowned, but didn't question it. He never did. Inside, he walked toward the front door and inserted his key. An old key, useless now. The smart lock registered an unauthorized entry. Beep, 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 beep. 10 seconds to disarm. "Lauren, what?" His voice wavered, panic creeping in. "I told you," I said quietly, arms crossed. "The house is mine. The codes have changed." He yanked at the handle again. Beep. Access denied. His eyes darted to me. "You can't do this. It's not funny." "It's not a joke," I said. "It's protection. Protection from people who think they can take what isn't theirs while I'm grieving." The sirens screamed to life, a deafening wail that tore through the quiet night, echoing off the walls, rattling the windows. Edward staggered back, covering his ears. I watched, detached, as the panic spread across his face. "You'll pay for this," he yelled over the noise. "Lauren, you can't." "I can," I interrupted. Calm, methodical, every word precise. "You should know what happens when people threaten my home." I lifted my phone, tapped a few commands. The motion sensors were live. The cameras were recording. Every angle, every reaction, every flinch, captured. Edward's face twisted from anger to confusion to horror as the reality sank in. He was trapped, legally and psychologically. The sirens blared for a full 30 seconds before I cut them off. The silence that followed was violent in its suddenness. Edward's face was red, blotchy, tears of rage brimming in his eyes. He stumbled, words failing him. "This isn't over," he hissed. "No," I said softly, voice low and controlled. "No, it isn't. But this time, you won't be the one in control." I stepped closer, letting him see the full weight of my composure, the sharp edge of calculated fury. For once, I was not the one left vulnerable. I picked up my phone again, dialed a number I knew would reinforce the message. "Yes, this is Lauren. I need to report a trespasser at my residence. Full police dispatch, please." Within minutes, lights flashed in the distance. Officer Breyer arrived first, calm, authoritative. Edward's panic spiked visibly. I walked the officers through the situation, showing them the text, the locks, the sensors. Every detail reinforced the narrative. I was the victim of a plot to usurp my home while I was grieving. Edward tried to interject, tried to paint himself as the wronged party, but the text was damning. "She's at his mother's funeral. The house will be ours." He had no defense. The officers listened, eyebrows raised, professionalism masking disbelief. "Ma'am," Officer Breyer said to me, "you've clearly taken precautions, but legally, you're within your rights." I nodded, letting the words sink into the air like a quiet hammer. Edward's smugness had evaporated. He was a man unmasked, exposed, cornered. As he stormed to his car, the weight of his betrayal finally seemed to hit him fully. Every secret he had hoped to keep, every lie he had spun, unraveled in the sharp, sterile light of the police cruiser. I stood on the porch, looking at the house I had fortified, the sensors gleaming faintly in the darkness. This was my domain, my sanctuary, my victory, cold, calculated, and complete. And yet, despite the satisfaction, I felt no joy, only the hollow echo of grief, tinged with the awareness that the man I loved, the life I had planned, had been nothing but an illusion. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. The legal battle, the public exposure. But tonight, the house was mine, and Edward, for the first time in years, knew it. The next morning, the sun cut a pale path through the blinds, painting the hardwood floors of my living room in soft gold. I sipped coffee slowly, savoring a moment of calm before the storm. My phone buzzed. Edward, endlessly calling, leaving frantic voicemails that I ignored. The sound grated on my nerves, but I stayed composed. Everything was in motion, and I had learned long ago that composure is a weapon as lethal as a blade. I called Frank, my lawyer, and walked him through the situation. Texts, police reports, sensor logs, all documented, all airtight. "He's expecting an easy fight," I said. "He won't have one, not after this." Frank chuckled, a low, knowing sound. "Good. Let him think he's playing chess while you've already checkmated him." By mid-morning, the first officer arrived to formally document the trespassing and Edward's attempts to manipulate the narrative. I showed them the incriminating text again. "He's not just lying," I said. "He's plotting. He's trying to take my home while I'm grieving my mother's death. Everything else is secondary." The legal battle escalated quickly. Edward, fueled by desperation, filed a civil suit claiming entitlement, emotional labor, and even conjured vague accusations about promises I supposedly made regarding the house. His lawyer tried to frame me as unstable, grieving, and impulsive, but Frank had anticipated everything. We subpoenaed Natalie, Edward's secret lover, the woman who had sent the text plotting the takeover. It was a move so subtle yet devastating. Natalie was married. Her involvement in funding Edward's schemes made his assets reel Edward to Edward's claims of financial and emotional hardship. The reaction was immediate. I watched the courtroom phone chain like a hawk, seeing lawyers scramble, Edward pale and sweating. The text, the evidence, the timing of the surveillance footage, it left him exposed. The arrogance of betrayal shattered under scrutiny. And yet, the most satisfying moment wasn't legal. It was psychological. Every day, Edward saw my composure, my methodical execution, and the fortress I had built. The house, sensors live, cameras recording, became a living testament to my reclaiming of power. Every time he tried to insert himself into my space, I was ready. Every attempt at manipulation backfired spectacularly. Meanwhile, Natalie's involvement, once hidden, now became a ticking time bomb. Every financial trail, every piece of communication, every rendezvous exposed the extent of his betrayal, not just to me, but to his unsuspecting wife. This wasn't just a personal victory. It was an unraveling of a web spun from lies, deceit, and arrogance. Weeks of hearings, motions, subpoenas, and depositions passed. Each session revealed more: Edward's schemes, Natalie's complicity, and the audacity of their plan to steal what was rightfully mine. Frank's strategy was elegant in its simplicity: expose the lies, document the betrayal, and leave no avenue for them to claim moral or financial high ground. Finally, the settlement. It was swift once they understood the depth of exposure. Edward and Natalie had no choice but to drop their claims entirely. Legal victory, yes, but the emotional closure was subtler. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt released. Free of the charade, free of the manipulation, free from the illusion of a life that never existed. Even now, weeks later, the house is quiet. The sensors hum softly, a constant reminder of the vigilance it took to reclaim it. I sit in my mother's study, her painting still draped, thinking about what's left after betrayal. Survival, clarity, and the unshakable realization that the people you trust most can sometimes be the ones plotting your undoing. Edward is gone from my life, Natalie exposed, and yet the lessons linger. Trust, once shattered, leaves a permanent mark. But I am still here, still standing, still in control of my life, my home, and my narrative. I pour another cup of coffee and sit by the window. The air is crisp, the streets quiet. A new chapter begins, not with vengeance, not with bitterness, but with the quiet certainty that I can protect what's mine, and that betrayal, no matter how cunning, will always be met with resolve. The house was quiet. For the first time in months, truly quiet. The hum of the security system was almost meditative, a subtle reminder of the battles fought and the vigilance required to reclaim my life. I moved through the rooms slowly, letting my hands brush over surfaces I had once shared with Edward, now untouched by his presence. The air smelled faintly of my mother's favorite candles, the ones she always lit in the evenings. I uncovered her painting. The canvas, unfinished and stubbornly vibrant, faced me as if waiting for my acknowledgement. I sat in front of it, the quiet room amplifying the memories, my mother's laughter in the kitchen, the softness of her hands when she held mine, her gentle guidance that had shaped every decision I would make. For a long time, I simply stared, letting the grief wash over me, mingled now with a strange sense of triumph. Edward and Natalie were out of my life. The legal battle had concluded in my favor. The civil suit evaporated under the weight of evidence, the subpoenas, and the damning text messages that exposed their betrayal. Natalie faced fallout in his personal life, too. A divorce, reputational damage, and the realization that his arrogance had left permanent scars not just on me, but on the people he pretended to love. Edward, humiliated and powerless, retreated into the shadows of his own making, stripped of the control he had once wielded so arrogantly. And yet, even in victory, I felt no rush of euphoria. What lingered was a quiet, deliberate clarity. I had survived grief, betrayal, and manipulation. I had protected what was mine, not with brute force or spite, but with intelligence, restraint, and meticulous preparation. Days passed, weeks blurred, but the ritual of remembrance remained. I would sit in the living room, coffee in hand, watching the sunlight shift across my mother's study. Sometimes I spoke aloud, telling her about the events that had transpired, as if her presence could bear witness to my resolve. I didn't need validation from anyone else. The peace in that room was proof enough. Life began to settle into a rhythm again. Work, friends, small joys that had been eclipsed by grief and betrayal started to reclaim space in my days. I learned to sleep without the constant vigilance that had consumed me during the height of the crisis. The house was my sanctuary again, fully mine, a fortress not just of steel and sensors, but of resilience and regained confidence. I occasionally thought of Edward, wondering if he realized the full extent of what he had lost, not just legally, but morally, emotionally. Natalie, too, became a distant echo, a cautionary tale in my mind about deceit and ambition unchecked by conscience. And yet, the most important realization was simple. I had reclaimed more than my house or legal rights. I had reclaimed myself. I had proven that grief could coexist with power, that loss could coexist with vigilance, that betrayal could coexist with calm, deliberate justice. I rose, walking to the window that overlooked the small garden my mother had planted. The autumn leaves swirled in the breeze, a quiet dance of colors that mirrored my own tumultuous emotions. I breathed deeply, letting the crisp air fill my lungs. For the first time in months, I felt a profound sense of presence, a clarity that was both grounding and liberating. The house was safe, my mother's memory honored, and my life, though scarred, was undeniably mine. The betrayals of Edward and Natalie were behind me, reduced to lessons carved into my consciousness, reminders of resilience, vigilance, and the unshakable power of reclaiming what is rightfully yours. I lingered by the window a moment longer, then turned back toward the painting. The unfinished canvas, like my journey, would always carry its mark of imperfection, yet it was complete in its purpose. It was preserved, protected, and treasured. And in that, I found closure.